This was a real side experience where the overall theme was that of a warning, a heads up, a personal heads up really, but one that others can take heed of also, for we are all going through our process, and although we all are individually unique, many facets and aspects of our process will be similar. We all are in the same simulator after all, and we are the overall effect of what we have collectively decided and agreed upon. So as we seek to face our personal selves and creation being the projected effect of the created self, we all will be facing relatively similar agreement tapline ideas. For if all our created selves, our created consciousnesses, have forged the creation we are in by virtue of the fact that we share this collective overall simulator experience, indicates how that which constructed it and perpetuates its construction must be relatively the same. For you can only experience a certain thing in creation if you have decided upon causes that make that experience so. Nothing then is beyond our personal choice. We are the deciders of everything, even if we do decide and agree with the ideas of others, and make whatever ideas they are, even if distorted, cabal-marketed ideas, our illusionary reality. Life and the real guides endeavour to give us hints and viewpoints that afford us potentialities, opportunities, and also warnings. As the guides stand with the isness as real awareness beings of light, they can oversee all of creation and every potentiality. They can see all the causes being set in motion, all the idea decisions, choices and agreements, and can see then the effects consequently. For only in creation are there cause to effect experience sequences of events, as in reality everything is. From this position of isness there is nothing created or added to it, for it is a complete and perfect reality and absolute, and so there is no need to add anything to what is everything. But as long as we keep deciding to create something, to agree to an idea that cause and effects it into a simulated experience reality, we can only do this in a simulated creation that is designed for this very purpose. By that very token then, if we wish to create, if we cannot let go of and release ideas that will forge these creations, then we are deciding to remain limited in creation, instead of being everything, being with this isness, and having no need to create or chase anything, as everything is, and we are then the everything that it is. So what would we need to add or create? The guides can then certainly see the outcome of every decision and agreement, simply because, from their position of standing real with life, everything is, Everything is in this nowness. Every effect that stems from every cause already is in this nowness. We can eventually learn to see as the guides and life sees also. We can go to the real side, and through our real awareness, we can see the effects already played out from causes we have set in motion now that simply take a little longer to manifest in the density of the physical. But manifest they will, if not in the days to come, maybe years down the line, or even projected effects that cement and lay out future lifetimes we have now resigned ourselves to. Although this can be to our advantage, that the density of the physical delays somewhat the cause-to-effect experiences we are generating, as from the illusion of the personal self-reality, we have the luxury then of decided upon time. In reality, time is an agreed-upon idea, and the apparent passage of time, of changing situations and circumstances, are simply causes that change, that result in changed effects. Someone creates the idea of a train, for example. It gets the required agreement. The effects of that cause are then trains featuring as a constant in our collective experience. It would seem then that the world has moved on, and we all tick off dates on our calendars. And so, with the understanding that the effects are not instantaneous on the physical level, we have the opportunity to view the effects before they actually occur on the real side, and this gives us the option to make better decisions. Paul Twitchell made many predictions in his day, and many did not come to pass, simply for that reason. What he saw was what was to be, based on what was being decided at that moment. But as choices and decisions changed, so then did the effect outcomes. And so, in this real side experience, I would find myself in a car as a passenger. As cars represent attitudes of the personal self, if we are sharing a car with others on the real side, we can surmise that we are sharing this same attitude. All attitudes are personal self-creations. The sun, as our best reference to the isness, and our real awareness, simply is, and has no attitudes whatsoever. It simply shines on all, in an absolute and perpetual demonstration of itself, of the isness that it is. We may well consider attitudes to be good or bad. We can categorize them this way, but all we are doing is adding extra idea considerations to the ideas that the attitudes already are. We have then rather a double-layered idea now, with more restricting taplining consequence, a little more convolution to our created consciousness. Far better to just have the attitude, if you're going to decide on one, without adding extra emotional ideas on top. As an example, people might chastise themselves for indulging a certain attitude, and consider themselves a bad person, etc. Of course, like anything in creation, everything is workable, and can be utilized as a benefit for the whole of life, if we recognize how this is so. Certain attitudes then can be beneficial, if they provide an additional driving force and thrust for our real intent, that being to recognize the all is. As an example, Dwayne once had an experience where he was driving in a car, and he would consider as to what attitude he might be entertaining in that moment. But on realizing the car was red, this he construed as being the colour of passion, the personal self-want to continue on forever into the unknown of the is. For yes, while in creation we have a personal self, and we're always dealing with it, despite how aware we are, and we do need to get it aligned with our real awareness, our real intent, and we utilize whatever we can to achieve this, and as such, certain attitudes are beneficial to this end. The attitudes that best align the personal self with this true reality are those of gratitude, sincerity, honour, etc. As Dwayne has said, gratitude is the best attitude, and although the isness, like the sun shining, simply is, and would exhibit no attitudes, regardless of their beneficial qualities, we do need to get the personal self focused and aligned with the real awareness, and such attitudes are a means to that end. And there I was, in the car. Dwayne was driving, and another individual was sat in the front in the other seat. I had the impression it was Ava. Again, we ought always pay heed to who we are driving with, for if we are sharing similar attitudes, indicated by who we are in the car with, then we may well need to re-evaluate our intent if we were to, say, find ourselves in a car with the Queen of England. And also, who is driving the car indicates that we are in agreement with whatever the intent of the driver happens to be. So we definitely don't want to be in the car with the Queen, and her to be the driver. And so, in this case, with Dwayne at the wheel, all was well with my intent. We are our intent, for it is the intent that positions us in life according to that which the intent is. On the real side, our intent is reflected back at us, so we can learn to determine the strength of our real intent based on the viewpoints we will receive. Dwayne would be driving toward a large building, and it seems I had an agreed-upon objective. As Dwayne stopped the car, I would disembark and approach the building. It had rather a strange look to it, as though distorted, as though I was about to take on a challenge and take a risk that would be beneficial, as in afford me greater awareness, but I was walking through a particularly hazardous distortion of creation to do so. For as we continue with our process, we do take on more and more, as we become more real, but we must be cautious not to go too swiftly, lest we overwhelm the personal self. A little like trying to jump into a university when we haven't the adequate grades and experience to do so. Nevertheless, I was going in, and Dwayne would voice this caution to me, and I kind of slid down a long descending slide to the building below. I would find myself initially in a house, but a house not my own. It was a house belonging collectively to a group of those that presented as friends on the physical. I was on the top floor, on the real side, but as it was their personal self-collective house, I was in the personal self-shared bubble reality of these group of friends, that I was afforded then a view of their personal selves from the real side, just as if we were on the top floor of our own houses, we would be on the real side of that personal self. So I was on the real side, but in the personal self real side of these individuals, whose collective personal self house it was, in the personal self bubble of this group on the real side. They were all speaking with each other, and I was the topic of their conversation, and they certainly made it quite apparent that they didn't hold me in high regard, despite how they presented themselves on the surface, on the physical. I had the impression that in fact this was a complete fabrication, that this scene had been set up in just this way, to have my personal self draw the conclusion that these friends were not what they seemed. Of course, you will get backbiting and such going on, the endless drama of social interaction and relationship on the physical that usually becomes a distortion, but in this case, this was all set up as a test, although at the moment of its occurrence I would not have realized this, only on awaking, and when I considered the view I was provided, did I have this impression. The idea was to place me in such a situation to see the reaction it may cause. The personal self tends to react automatically through emotion, and however we have programmed and routined it to be. But as we become more aware, we endeavour to more so operate from the detached indifference of the real awareness, regardless of the experiences we go through, and the abrasive individuals we may encounter, and so it makes sense to stage such situations from time to time, almost to mark our progress, and these individuals were role-playing, as it were, for they were in fact a group of new friends, and with Dwayne present also. But as I remained indifferent to what I was overhearing, as I remained in my real awareness more so, I could sense no ill intent from this group, that it was just words, and no substance. It was just a created situation as a test for my ability to stand in my real awareness in the face of what would have seemed to the personal self quite a shock to hear such. For my personal self was always very sensitive, and tended to react very emotionally to anything that it considered to be derogatory and directed at it. And as we continue with our process, as we face all of creation, we will be facing and confronting endless swathes of individuals, and most will not receive us very graciously, as our presenting of the ears will infringe upon the comfort zones of their personal decided realities, and they tend not to like that. They'd rather pretend everything is fine, and that the simulator isn't in fact imploding. So it doesn't help to have an over-sensitive personal self. But despite how we have constructed it, as we learn to step into our real awareness, we sidestep its limited construction, and it has no bearing on our process. So this was simply one of those occasional tests, with the new friends and Dwayne playing a role in it, to determine the extent of my ability to stand in the reality of my real awareness in the face of what would previously have drawn me into my personal self through my emotional, oversensitive reaction to situations. Although not overreacting with personal emotion, at that moment I did consider this event to be genuine. Only on waking did I receive the further impressions, which made it apparent as to how it was staged, for the reasons I explained. And so I vacated the house, and walked away from the new friends and Dwayne, and the scene switched. I found myself in a large building, a kind of school. It was a place of magical practice and study, and so I had evidently decided to walk away, and pursue creational ideas along the lines of the psychic sciences, which of course would equal absolutely nothing. A little dabbling with such ideas, a few thrills, and the end result will be future lifetimes in a worsened simulator, as I would be deciding to step back into the personal self, where cause and effect applies, a self-decided trap of restriction with no escape. The only escape being, of course, through the real awareness, aside from the matrix of the simulators, and beyond cause and effect. In this place of magic, I specifically made an association with a woman who had all kinds of magical abilities. She may well have represented the influence in fact, fanning the flames of my want to pursue this pointless cause and effect avenue of limited experience. Seems I was getting myself mired in these ideas I now was deciding upon. Then the scene switched, and there I was, with the same woman and another individual. We were approaching a large gate, which bore the warning sign, "No entry." But we would proceed through it regardless, and into what seemed to be a sea of hay or straw-like material. Nothing else could we see but this straw. We were engulfed in it. There was an individual on a tractor, and this man was seemingly doing his best to tidy up all the mass of straw, to separate it, bundle it up into areas that daylight could seep through, for at this moment we could see neither the sky or the sun. Amidst the mass of straw we were floundering in. This I construed as representing all the ideas I now was taking on, represented by all these strands of straw, for straw is very much of the earth, and so would represent creation, and so creationally based ideas specifically. And see how the mass of ideas all compacted became denser as more ideas were added to the ideas, everything escalating out of control. The warning sign on the gate was there to take heed of, to not enter this area, to not go along this decided path of creational idea agreements. But ultimately the decision is always ours to make, and so the gate could not bar our path. The sign very likely placed there by a guide, and this very guide was the tractor driver I would suggest. The ideas, the straw, were blotting out the very sun, suggesting a disconnect from my real awareness, the isness that the sun represented, as I became absorbed in all the straw ideas, and the term straw is used to describe individuals also, as straw men, people of no actual substance or significance, just as these ideas would be, illusionary created things that equalled nothing. And so the tractor driver, the guide, was doing his best to allow the sun to shine through, to try and clear away the ideas that were blocking it. But ultimately, as the deciders of our experience, the guides can only help us, they can't decide for us, as free will cannot be infringed upon, free will simply being that where we position ourselves according to what we decide. And no guide can interfere with that or drag us into the real universes. The guide evidently saw my predicament, and saw the opportunity to assist where able, but only where agreement on my behalf would allow, and as the agreement was slowly lessened, as I became more absorbed in creation, the guide was unable to do anything consequently. I would lose sight of him in the straw. I would lose sight of my two companions also. And then everything faded away. I had the impression of transition, of assuming a new physical lifetime position in creation, projected as a consequence of my deciding to go with the personal self, because as the scene switched again, I found myself in an exotic alien world, very colourful indeed, and there I was with my two companions again. We were in strange, hard-to-describe alien body vehicles, and sat on a beach, as it were, before a large body of water. So here I was, projected into a new lifetime and body vehicle in some strange new world, as a result of agreement to ideas of a psychic science nature. Undoubtedly, I would be unconscious again, with no knowledge of the ears, or the references pertaining to its recognition, and here were the same two companions from before, as we would be embroiled and wrapped up in each other's karma through emotional tap-lining attachment, to find ourselves on this alien world. Maybe the woman in the group was the influence, as I said, and still present, for the influence is the created consciousness, and fans the desires of every individual in creation, because basically people want to be controlled, to be influenced, hence the decided creation of the being referred to as the influence for that very function. And so, as long as we're in creation, there the influence will be, and continue to feature as that which encourages and entices the emotional desires that keep us in the simulators. This world may have seemed very fine on the surface, despite my now being unconscious and lost in creation again, until maybe, some day or lifetime, another opportunity to recognize the ears rolls around. But wait, suddenly, from the ocean we sat before, a swarm of spiders emerged. Also, they would descend from the skies and attack us, and I and my companions would spend the rest of the experience fending them off. For me, I've seen the great darkness enveloping creation as the simulator continues its agreed-upon demise, represented as swarms of bugs and spiders sweeping over worlds and absorbing everything in their path. And so, I suggest that as pleasant an area as this creational spot in this alien world seemed to be, nowhere is safe in cause and effect creation, and certainly nowhere is safe from the degrading simulator. If you remain in this simulator at this time, you will be caught up in its implosion. And here came the swarms of spiders, representing this very simulator degrading situation. And so I would awake and evaluate the experience. It was as though I was afforded an entire sequence of decided events, showing how, by walking away from the golden opportunity of standing real with the guides and the ears, future unconscious lifetimes in a deteriorating simulator will be the result, no matter how fine the alternative feel-good creational ideas seem to be, the psychic sciences, etc. This is perhaps why Dwayne warned me at the beginning, perhaps a test I was to undergo, but maybe I was going at it too soon. For agreement to the test had Dwayne and the new friends playing a staged event to determine my ability to stand indifferent to a specific situation that my personal self would have previously instantly reacted to emotionally, and although I handled it better than I would have years ago, still there was the risk I might walk away. But it was still something to be faced regardless, and had to be so, sooner or later. that we can stand indifferent in the face of abuse and betrayal from those we thought were friends, for example. For sometimes the guides even will stand in our way on occasion to test our resolve and determination for the journey of his recognition. Dwayne once shared an experience of how he wanted to proceed onward, and the guides stood before him and blocked his path, and Dwayne would tell them to stand aside. They would do so, for it was just a test to determine the continued heart and want for the journey. And I've had a few similar experiences where, despite the guides suggesting I turn back from a situation, I proceeded anyway, and doing so was for my awareness benefit. Again a test to see my want to continue. And so this entire experience was a test, and also a view of what would happen should I fail it after taking it on. But it was a test for a specific part of my created consciousness personal self. I had to face and go through a specific scenario. For ultimately we must get to a point where we stand 100% real, where we are free of attitudes, assumptions, considerations and convictions, that despite what we undoubtedly will encounter as we go through our process, we can step aside and around it, and not react through the personal self. And like preparing a soldier for the battlefield of creation, comes the practice, the tests, and the mocked-up arenas of combat. How the sergeant may put a gun to our head if we enter a staged practice arena without properly checking our vicinity for potential hostiles, where he would shout, "Bang, you're dead." As I said at the beginning, I would consider this a heads up. Of these various tests and trials we will go through as we continue our journey through creation and the facing of it all. For it all boils down to intent, and as we wade through all the ideas of creation, if we hold true to our real intent, if we stay real and maintain our focus on the ears as the deciders of our experience and position in life, standing real with the ears and the real guides must then ultimately be our destiny.
Very, very good. I suggest everyone really pay attention to this because it's for you. And yes, it is a warning, just like the sign. It is very, very real. It is a warning because it doesn't take much to go the other way. It's not that so much that you would do that. That's your choice. But the idea is that you were on assignment to go through this and let the world know what's going on. First of all, the people here. Again, it's a warning that most people take for granted. They just don't see it. See, most people come here at first. They just want the knowledge and information, and they do take it for granted. They dilly-dally. They bring all their so-called information that they've collected, and they think they know something, which they don't realize that they've went through high school, and now this is really the university level. That's why I created the university, and that's why the Real Guides and I created it on the real side. So And I'm going to go over a little experience that I've told many times in the past. There was this fellow with us. He was a wonderful fellow, did a lot of videos and Skypes together, and he was shown an experience too when I first met him within the first year or so, to where he was standing in a hotel room, and the room was kind of a mess, and there was towels on the floor, clothes, and a few beer bottles on the beds in there. There's a couple beds usually in a little hotel room. And then right near the door, there was a woman with two children looking at him and said, "Why did you do it?" And so when he told me this, like yours there, I immediately said, "This is a warning to you." Well, guess what? Years later, he bit the bullet. He left. And I see him on the real side now. He just struggles because he went with some sound good stuff. And again, it's not about me. All I do is refer to the is. This is the time to recognize the is. And most people, they won't take the time, or they think it's like a god or something or whatever. No, it's something that you can't even consider, that's more real than you'll ever realize, and very few get through it. So this experience and how you've explained it all, Kevin, is excellent. If people really take it to heart and develop the intent, see where their intent is, the sincerity, and especially gratitude, but sincerity most of all. And see, I came through the corporation. I've come through a lot of things, like all of us. And what I recognize is these people don't know what their intent is. They don't know what's their real awareness and how it's placed, etc. It's all about their mind and emotions and being attached to the master idea and being baby brains and being babysat. That's where in the past that Paul said meditation is a passive system. And again, we do not meditate. We are real. You can sing the new you with your eyes open, walking down the street. That becomes your session, whatever you decide, or lay in bed or cross-legged or whatever. This has nothing to do with chakras, initiations, and all this nonsense we went through. We went through it. We went through high school. High school was nonsense. We went through it. We learned what not to do. That's why I was to stay with the corporation all those years. Through Darwin and Harold, I knew them both personally, to see what not to do, because the big part has come, the new wave is. And very few people will recognize it, take advantage, and be grateful that you have this, and step up and do something. You have to prove yourself. Just because you know about the guides and you've read a few of the books doesn't mean a whole lot. You have to prove yourself every bit of the way, 100% all the way, and learn to stand real with this reality. So this is a great experience, Kevin. Thank you so much for showing up, and yes, thank you.